I see dead people walking around like regular people.
I don't see anything. Are you sure they're there?
This is a story about books and best-selling novelist Alex Michaelides. But movies like this one,
I think ever since I saw The Sixth Sense, that movie with, Bruce Willis, and it just blew my mind.
had a big influence on both our talk and his life.
Please make them leave.
The Sixth Sense? Michaelides credits it with his desire to write books with shocking twists.
There's something about reaching the end and then having a moment that makes your mind race back to the beginning and you see the whole thing unravel again. And that's something I would try to work really hard at to do in my books.
If you're one of the 6.5 million people who purchased his first novel, The Silent Patient, you'll know Alex Michaelides is definitely accomplishing that mission. And here's where movies come in again. The author says part of the reason The Silent Patient was so good was because of this movie.
Let's get started.
Michaelides was the screenwriter on this film, and while he was on the movie set, he became friends with one of its stars.
Yeah, it's Uma Thurman, yeah.
Uma ultimately gave him some advice that led him away from writing scripts and toward a hugely successful career writing books.
I learned a lot from the stuff she taught me. So I went back to London and I rewrote The Silent Patient using all of her great ideas.
In this conversation, Michaelides shares Uma's advice and how he thanked her for it in his most recent novel, The Fury, a psychological thriller that traps a famous ex-movie star and her 6 best friends on a Greek island, a setting Michaelides knows well. He grew up in that part of the world, watching movies and reading Agatha Christie. As in his past books, the magic of Greek mythology slips into this book in the form of a ferocious wind, also known as the Fury.
The locals say it drives you crazy, and it does.
We'll talk more about the inspirations for his books, how all 3 are optioned for movies or TV, and his writing process, which includes selecting one album to listen to during the writing of a novel. For The Fury, it was the music that's been playing throughout this introduction. The soundtrack to, you guessed it, a movie, The Hours.
It's just piano, and it's really haunting. But then when you listen to it non-stop, several times a day, for a year or so, you go completely bananas. And I will never be able to listen to that record ever again as long as I live.
That, plus how he was dropped by his agent right before he wrote this global bestseller.
Wow. Oh, I bet they're really regretting that.
Yeah, I mean, he did email me and said congratulations a few years later, which was nice.
That's all next in this conversation with author Alex Michaelides.
Alex Michaelides, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a great, great pleasure to be here.
So this is your first book tour ever, right?
Yes, it is. I didn't do a tour with my first novel, The Silent Patient. And then COVID happened, and so the book tour that was planned for the Maidens got cancelled. And so now is the first time that I'm meeting readers in America, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see you all, so thank you for coming.
You grew up in Cyprus.
We should say for people who don't know that Cyprus is like a tiny island about the size of this stage, pretty much. Mediterranean island, yeah, so very different to here, yeah.
Speaking of the island, you were just named Man of the Year for Cyprus, right?
You.
That's pretty cool. And it was in your hometown, right?
I've done your research. Yes. Yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking, but very nice. Yeah.
How so? Just being up there? It was with the president,
yeah.
right? Gave it to you?
Yeah, the president. Yeah, you just feel, unworthy, really. But it was very nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about growing up there. There are many differences, but the difference I want to talk about is the influence of Greek mythology on you. Because in The Silent Patient, one of your characters, Diomedes, says, every Greek knows his tragedies. The tragedies are our myths, our history, our blood. And I was wondering if you feel that way, because as readers, your fans of yours know that Greek mythology slips into your books in a wonderfully entertaining way. I just wonder if it's so much of who you are.
Thank you. Yes, it is. I think, growing up in Greece and the Greek part of the world is kind of unavoidable, really, because there's, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, she was born just off the coast of Cyprus, where I'm from, and she swam to the island, and then she sort of claimed it. And so it's a very ancient place, and there are temples and ruins dedicated to her everywhere. And then at school, you're taught Greek mythology, and so instead of Shakespeare, I was learning Homer and Euripides. And so it's a very different cultural heritage. But I just love the stories,
They're fascinating.
Yeah, they're so full of magic and, madness and anger and rage and all of these great juicy emotions, and they inspire me constantly and inspire my work. The moment I knew I was going to write about the wind in Greece, I straight away looked up the Greek goddess of the wind. And there's a goddess of the morning breeze, which is, you think will be sweet and sort of, cute. But in fact, she didn't like men, and she used to hunt them with Artemis. And then when she gave birth to a son, she ate him. And so that's the kind of stuff that you get from Greek mythology, which you don't get from many other sources.
You can't make that up.
No.
Yeah.
And also, what I really love about Greek mythology particularly is that they were writing thousands of years ago, like thousands of years before the first therapist. And yet the stories, it makes sense, and they're true. So, like, say a character like Medea, who murders her own children, we obviously don't approve of her, and we don't think she's in any way a likable or decent human being. But we believe her. We don't think, oh, this character's unrealistic, this would never happen. And so that's what really excites me about the myths, is that you can analyze them, you can put them on a therapist's couch, and they still make complete sense. And so it's amazing.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Yeah. Let's talk about the island. The Greek goddess that you're talking about is Aura.
Yeah.
And so this is a made-up island that you got to create. What is it like creating your own private, haunted Greek island?
It was fun. Again, it goes back to so I taught myself to write these kinds of books by studying Agatha Christie, because I loved her when I was a kid, and she made me into a reader. She made me into a writer. I love detective stories. One of the first rules that you realize is they have to be set in a kind of enclosed location. And there's not one that she didn't use, really, like an airplane, a train carriage, an island. And so I was working in a psychiatric unit when I was studying therapy, and I was walking down the corridor one day, and I thought, oh, this would be a great location for a murder mystery. And Agatha Christie never used this. So I did. And
very effectively, I might add. Yeah.
And then with the second book, I thought about a Cambridge college, and Agatha Christie never set a mystery in a college, because I think my personal explanation is because she never went to university, and I think perhaps she thought she couldn't bring it to life in a realistic way. So I did it there in a college, and then I ran out of locations that she hadn't used. And so I had to then, go to a Greek island.
She'd never been on a Greek island.
She's never gone to a Greek island. And that was the easy part for me, was the first two novels required, extensive research and stuff like that. Whereas having grown up on a Greek island, I just could shut my eyes, and it was easy to imagine it all. And it was really fun to bring all of that stuff from my childhood in, yeah.
So that's what you were drawing on. What brought the idea of the premise of this story to you?
That's an interesting question, Angie. I think it's for me, the way that I write, and I don't know what other writers say, is it's usually a collision of 3 or 4 ideas that have been percolating for a long time in your head, and then they come together. The germ of it probably came when I was about 20 years old, and I was on the island of Mykonos, and I got stuck there for 3 days because the wind was so bad. Because they misrepresent the wind to you, the Greek tourist board, I think. Because they sort of, paint Greece as this idyllic, beautiful place, which it is, but the wind is insane. The locals say it drives you crazy, and it does. And when I was stuck on the island because no boat could land and no boat could leave, I thought, this is a great way to trap people for murder. As you do.
I would love to know, did your family know that you were thinking about this? And as people got to know this, did you find them scooching away from you? Honestly, when you started writing these things, did your family think, what in the world? Or did they know this, that you had this?
I've never asked them that. I do. So my mum texted me today, and she said that she had dinner with some of my cousins and an aunt of mine who I've not seen in a long time. And she said, your aunt told me to tell you that she loved the book. But she said, why does it have to end so sadly? What's wrong with a happy ending? Why don't people like happy endings? And my mum said, well, he doesn't, apparently. So I guess they have a sense, I'm slightly awed, but...
Let's talk a little bit about the very unreliable narrator we have, Eliot, who's telling, and he mentions, you mentioned as the author many times that he's unreliable. He didn't actually begin as your narrator, right? You wrote it.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit of that evolution. How did he become the narrator of this book?
Well, I think I kind of should probably jump a step back to answer that, in that I changed the way that I wrote this novel compared to my first two. And I think it's because I wanted to have some fun. I probably should have taken a longer off after The Silent Patient than I did, because I wasn't expecting A Silent Patient to succeed or be published or anything. I just wrote it for myself, and then it became a hit.
That's an understatement, yes. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, 6.5 million copies. Yeah, right, yeah.
So that's, so my agent dropped me just before the book came out. And so that's where the place I was at, where I was thinking, shit, this is not working out. So I was a little taken aback by its success, and I probably should have just regrouped. But my new agent said to me but you've got to write a second book at some point. It might as well be today. And in the end, I'm kind of grateful, because I think otherwise I could have perhaps been like Donna Tartt and taken 10 years to write another book, because writing a second novel is scary, and it's much worse than writing the first one, because the first one, you just do it for yourself and you don't think anyone's going to read it, so there's no pressure. And then there's a lot of pressure with the second book, and then I chose subject matter, which was, for the Maidens, was very dark and very sad. And then 3 years later, I was quite depressed. And so this is a very long-winded way, I apologize, of saying I wanted to have some fun.
Yeah.
And part of the way of me to have fun was not to plan this book the way I planned the first two, where I planned them for like a year and a half before writing. This time I came up with the characters, I came up with the location, and I just dived in. And I didn't know who the murderer was, and I didn't know who the victim was. I just wanted to see where it went. And then I got to the end, and I gave it to Ryan, my editor, and he said, this is terrible. It doesn't make any sense, and the twist is ludicrous, and it's all bonkers. So he said, either you've got a choice, either you can bin it, or you can go back to the beginning and try and work out another story. So I was having so much fun that I decided not to panic, and I just closed my laptop for a whole month, and I walked around the park, and I just told myself the story. And I started off by telling myself the opening line, which is, this is a tale of murder. And then for the first time, I asked myself who could be talking. And I thought, well, what if it's this minor character, Eliot, who at that point was just, he's a playwright and he's sarcastic, and his role was just to make wisecracks and drink martinis. And he had a very small part. And I thought, well, what if he's telling the story? So I rewrote the whole book in the first person, with him talking to somebody who I think, in retrospect, was me. And it was the most kind of joyous, creative experience I've ever had, really.
But you talk about how you didn't research it, but yet you really dove into every character. I've read that you wrote a lot about each character so that you fully understood this. You wrote so much that it's not in the book. That was just for you, right? The character development?
I'm alarmed by how well prepared you are. It's not something I'm used to. It's kind of freaking me out slightly. What else do you know, Angie, about me?
Sorry.
Yes, I wrote like, because I think I overextended myself with my second novel. It was too many characters and I couldn't go as deep as I would like to. And so this time was just 7 characters and 6 really, because one of them dies. I was able to spend a lot
On
of
page 2.
Yeah. Thinking about them, and I wrote pages and pages for each character about their childhood, really, because that's my interest. It's the psychology of the where we come from, and why we become the people that we become. And so I thought, if I really understand what happened to them as kids, then every choice they make is going to come from a place of truth. And I didn't put any of that in the book because it felt important that I know it, not necessarily that the reader knows it. Because I think the reader can sense that kind of thing.
Yeah. So Elliot has this deep fascination with movies, and in the book, as you read, you'll find out that he loves movies, grows up watching lots of movies, which you have there's a similarity there, right? Because I've read that you loved movies as a kid, in particular Pulp Fiction. Yeah? Which is interesting because if you open your book, you will see the person that this is dedicated to is Uma. I only know one Uma. I'm sure you only know one Uma. And it's the Uma, right?
Yeah, it's Uma Thurman. Yeah.
You're friends, and this book, if it becomes a movie, she is Lana.
Yeah, I wrote it for her. I was a screenwriter and I lived in Hollywood for a while, not successfully, I hasten to add, unfortunately. But I'm grateful now because it drove me to writing novels, which I think I'm better at. But I was writing The Silent Patient, and I was working on this film with Uma. I got to know her because on the second day of filming, she said to me, she had a few hours off, and she said, come and sit on this wall and have a bottle of wine with me, and we'll go through the script, and I'll tell you why it isn't going to work. Oh. Which is kind of not what you want to be hearing on the second day of the shoot, really. But she was great because she just taught me so much about writing. She just, she said that it can't just be 2 people talking like this. It has to be a visual image, and you have to try and shape every scene towards a visual. And I learned a lot from the stuff she taught me. So I went back to London and I rewrote The Silent Patient, using all of her great ideas. Like one of them was, in the first draft of The Silent Patient, Alicia was a writer. And Uma said to me, well, wouldn't it be better if she doesn't talk, if she's a painter? Because then she can paint her subconscious and we can see. And I was like, that's a really good idea. I'm going to take that.
Yes.
And so it's just learning to think in that way. And I owe her a great deal. So I thought that one day I would try and write something for her. And so I based the character of Lana, this movie star, on Uma. And yeah, it's been optioned, and hopefully she's going to play the lead. So we'll
I'd watch that. Exactly, yeah. Talk a little bit, since you brought up the screenwriter. So you worked as a screenwriter 3 movies, right? Yeah. I've heard you say, obviously you have this childhood. I mean, it had been like a childhood dream to be on the set of a movie and all these things, but...
It's all I ever wanted to do as a kid was just, my mum was always like, you have to go out on a bike and you have to make some friends. And I was like, no, I think I'll just stay at home and watch films. And then later books, but originally it was movies, and I love old Hollywood movies, and I always wanted to go with the characters wherever they went. And I thought if I could just get to Hollywood, I'd be happy. And then I got there and I was just as miserable and neurotic as I always had been before.
I've heard you say that being a screenwriter was one of the most depressing jobs, because I didn't know this, but as a screenwriter, you're there and you're watching your script, which you've worked years on, just get torn apart, right?
Yeah, well, it's different in TV. In TV, the screenwriter is the most important person. But if you're in a film, you work on the set, and the director is the most important person, and the writer is the least important person. And so the writer will change the script, or the actors will, or the location will fall through, or the costumes aren't right, and they'll just rewrite something on the spot. and then call you 6 months later from the edit room saying, this is a disaster. And you're like, yo, like, I know, I saw that happening.
You're right. I was there. I saw, yeah.
And it was really bumming me out. And I've wanted to try and be it all. With a novel, I can be the director and the actors and the costume designer and everything. And I get to be just on my own with a laptop creating a whole world that's intact, that no one takes my books, apart from my editor, rightly so. No one takes my books and changes them. And that's part of it. It sounds like it is to do with control, I guess, but it's also just about what you're better at. And once I got inside a character's head for the first time, like when I started writing Theo, I just thought, oh, I can do this. I'm meant to be doing this. And I never felt that comfortable writing a script. Having said that, I am writing the script for The Fury.
Oh, wow.
I'm attempting, because I know I'm going to get fired anyway. So I've just figured, they asked me and I said, so I'm doing that right now.
Really?
Yeah, and it's really fun. I'm enjoying visiting these characters again. I thought that I would be sick of them, but I'm not. I'm really having fun reimagining new scenes and new dialogue, and it's a really fun experience. So.
Wow. So of your 3 books, they've all been optioned. The Silent Patient by Plan B, Brad Pitt's production house, right? Miramax with the Maidens for TV series, and The Fury's been optioned by
Nina Jacobson.
Okay.
At Color Force. She's great. She made The Hunger Games and a million other movies. So, yeah.
Little films, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and they will be potentially, hopefully, touch wood, some exciting news about the Silent Patient movie very soon.
What else? Are you writing something right now?
I knew the tour would be mind-blowing. I didn't realize quite how mind-blowing it would be. And so I haven't been able to write now. So what I did was I planned my next book before. And Billy Wilder, who's like my favorite writer, really, and he wrote Some Like It Hot and The Apartment and Sunset Boulevard. He said, always come out of a different hole, always do something different. And after The Maidens, which was slow and sad, I wanted to write something faster, more upbeat, with a slight sense of humor. And now I feel ready for like a slow, serious detective story again, which I think you can't write off the cuff like this. I think you have to plan it. So I have planned it. But what I'm going to incorporate, I think, is the sense of play that I found in The Fury. And I'm going to allow myself to change it if I want to. And, yeah, I'm excited about it.
That sounds good. I want to go back to something you said a while ago. So your agent had dropped you right before you wrote The Silent Patient?
Yeah. Different agent, yeah.
Wow. Oh, I bet they're really regretting that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he did email me and said congratulations a few years later, which was nice. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you don't, he dropped me as a screenwriter. He didn't drop me as a novelist. And I just think that's the difference, really. I think it's a good lesson for all of us here. It's just that you just have to follow your heart and do what you're really meant to be doing. And it kind of kills me that for 20 years I was in the wrong job,
Well, but you thought you were following your heart. It took a minute to figure that out, right?
Yeah, it did. And I guess that's how life works, isn't it? Things always I always find that you're kind of where you're meant to be, in a way. Things do work out.
That's how.
We're getting quite deep here.
Films. They've shaped Alex Michaelides' life and his writing. In fact, here's one more movie moment from our conversation. Do you recognize this voice?
This is a tale of murder. Or maybe that's not quite true.
That's actor Alex Jennings. He played Prince Charles in The Queen and Prince Edward, the Duke of Windsor, on The Crown. Michaelides knew he was the voice of Elliot in the audio version of The Fury.
Because I was trying to write someone who was kind of being sarcastic and making jokes, I knew I had to have an actor who was going to land the jokes and get the rhythm right. And this English actor, Alex Jennings, kept popping into my head because he has a very clipped delivery and he's very light and ironic.
Fortunately for the millions of Michaelides fans, films may motivate him and his works, but writing novels is where he's truly meant to be.
I love writing. I love doing what I do. And it's more fun than fun, really. I have such a great time.